So recently I've been asking myself why I use this YouTube channel to talk about only some of the things that I'm interested in rather than all of the things I'm interested in, or at least maybe a bit of a wider range. I think it's because when I first started this channel, I had it in mind that I needed to be talking to a specific audience. I started it as a spiritual/pagan YouTube channel, and I didn't want to, I suppose, bore people with things that were not necessarily relevant to what they were expecting, that wasn't relevant to their spiritual practice and so on. And I guess for a long time that was fine because actually my main interests in life were directly relevant to spirituality. I was mostly interested in learning tarot, I was interested in reading tarot for other people, I was interested in developing my spiritual practice and ritual and that kind of thing. And maybe in some ways I actually used my spiritual practice to blinker myself from some wider issues that I kind of didn't really want to look full on in the face. I stopped thinking about things like politics and basic human rights and my beliefs about how the world should be and the differences between how I feel it should be and how it actually is, and environmentalism and feminism and all of these really important topics that are really, really relevant to our day-to-day lives and our future and the future of this planet. I guess at some point in my late teens I just started to feel like there wasn't anything I could do. I started to feel disempowered and helpless, and that there was nothing that I personally as an individual could do to change the political system. I just sort of gave up, and I think in a way that immersing myself in my spiritual practice and in spirituality as a discourse, I suppose, was partly a way of avoiding the fact that I felt this huge cognitive dissonance, that there were these things and there are these things that are important to me about the world, about what I feel is going wrong with the world, what is still wrong with the world, and the way that the world is likely to continue to get worse in certain ways, but also the way in which the world is also actually getting better in other ways. I think I actually sort of refocused myself on spirituality as a way to try to alleviate this cognitive dissonance that developed in my mind, because I was directly avoiding thinking about and addressing the fact that I was living my life while pretending to myself that I didn't care about some pretty major world issues that I do actually intensely care about. The slow and gradual realization that I could no longer avoid thinking about some of those things has been coming on for quite a long time. Becoming vegetarian was a huge part of that, definitely was one of the symptoms of that gradual change. I guess maybe that decision was actually the catalyst for all of the other changes that I feel have been happening in my mind ever since then. That once I actually stood up and said, no, I'm not going to eat meat anymore, I was taking one step towards being less hypocritical, towards actually trying to enact and trying to do something about the beliefs that I actually have, and allowing myself to think about them. And sometimes it's not until you stop being so hypocritical in even one tiny way that you can actually let yourself really think about your beliefs and actually acknowledge them and realize that yes, there are a lot of things that I wish I could change that I feel like I can't. But maybe taking that one little step has just helped me to realize that doing something really, really, really small is better than doing nothing at all. And whatever tiny, tiny difference it might make for me to not consume meat, that can be replicated in other areas of my life. And that has gradually been growing over time without me really thinking about it too much, you know? I've been thinking more about environmentalism and what the tiny little changes that I can do to help. And I started reading more non-fiction that isn't solely associated with spirituality, for example. And it's just kind of all gradually crept up on me. And I just started to realize a little while ago that for a while I talked about all the things that I was most excited about on this channel because I was most excited about spirituality, because spirituality seemed like a sort of holy grail that was going to pull me up out of some sort of funk that I had found myself in my kind of early to mid-20s. But right now I'm really excited about other things. I'm really excited about environmentalism and all of those other things that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. And I finally realised that actually this doesn't have to be divorced from my spirituality. I made a video a good while ago, I'd say a year and a half ago now, on environmentalism and paganism, and it's quite long and rambling and a little bit disconnected and a little bit confused still, because I was only just starting to decide that my pantheism, my personal spirituality, doesn't have to be completely separate from my morality. I had this idea that my morality, like my moral imperative as a human being in society, was separate, completely separate from my personal spiritual feeling. I felt like my pantheistic belief told me that humans are sacred, everything is sacred in the universe, and that it was really only some sort of societally related human moral imperative that was telling me that I should do something about our environmental crisis, that I should maybe try to alleviate the suffering of other humans and other animals on the planet. And it's kind of gradually become clear to me more and more in my own mind that that isn't true, or it certainly doesn't have to be true. And even though I practice spirituality from a very personal perspective, even though I don't practice in a group, even though some of my spiritual practice is very much focused on personal inner development, there is nothing stopping me from exploring how my beliefs that the universe is sacred actually can impact my beliefs about how our society should be run and how we should be treating the planet and that kind of thing, how we should be treating each other. And there's a whole lot of exploration there waiting for me to do. And I really want to start doing it. I really want to start thinking about that stuff and drawing connections between that stuff, because at the end of the day, I do feel like our planet is sacred, and I do feel like its natural state is sacred. As in, I feel like when we kind of stop trying to control the planet, for example, and let it rewild, let the natural processes reassert themselves, I feel like that is more sacred than when we are trying to control it. And I'm going to talk about that more soon in a book review. And I feel like the damage that we're doing to this planet and the selfish consumption that has led to that damage, and probably irreversible damage in a lot of cases, and climate change and all of that, I feel like that is definitely not as sacred as the good work that we can do to try to contain that and contain that damage and contain the future dangers and difficulties that our future generations are going to face, and even our generation will probably face as we get older. So I think one thing I need to think and talk about soon is the question of the word sacred, and how I have been equating the word sacred with my belief that the universe is divine, and that all of the universe is divine, and that actually it's a separate word, and I can actually choose to use that word differently to that kind of A equals B kind of definition that I had in my mind. Because if I associate the word sacred more with specialness, or even with morality and ethics and goodness and that kind of thing, then there's kind of maybe more interesting exploration that can be done there. So these are all things that I kind of want to think and talk about more on the channel. And one of the ways that I want to start integrating this more is by talking about books and talking about what I read, because one of the main interests that I did actually maintain while creating this channel, while talking about spirituality, was reading. I have always read. I've always read a lot, and not only non-fiction, and like I say, not only non-fiction books about spirituality, but I read a lot of fiction. I read a lot of other non-fiction, and I think it's time for me to start talking to you guys about that, because wouldn't it be interesting to have a think about how my reading actually interacts with my pantheism, and how as a pantheist I approach and respond to and react to certain books, whether it's fiction or non-fiction. So I'm going to kind of start with books that are pretty relevant to the topics that I already talk about. I want to start with books that are particularly relevant to my pantheism. And then I kind of want to branch out a little bit. I want to talk about other books that aren't necessarily obviously connected, but I kind of want to connect them. I want to draw them all in to that kind of core concept that the universe is sacred, and there are lots of different ways that we can think about that, and there are lots of different ways that we can react to that statement. There are lots of different beliefs that can stem from that one core belief. So yeah, I guess in 2017 I just want this channel to start getting a little bit bigger, a little bit wider. I want to kind of stretch my wings a little bit. I want to expand my horizons. I don't want to keep restricting myself on what I feel like I can and can't talk about on this channel just for arbitrary reasons that I set myself when I first started the channel. And some of you might not be interested in some of these videos, and that's okay, but I feel like it's important for me where I am right now in my thinking, in my life. I think it's really important for me to talk about these things, and I have no interest in creating a separate channel because I think it's all connected. I think it's all related, and I can definitely see how my greater interest in environmentalism and social justice and those kind of things has stemmed from my pantheism and from immersing myself back into spirituality and a spiritual way of thinking. That has been what has unlocked that side of me again. That side of me that thinks, well, okay, maybe there's no change that I can make, but if I sit around and do nothing, then I definitely won't change anything. So at the very least, maybe I should try.